Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and today I'm going to talk about the writings of Dashiell Hammett, because in these past weeks I've read through some of those early novels that he wrote, and the ones that I've read are this, which is an anthology, book of short anthologies featuring the Continental Op detective, the who worked for the Continental Detective Agency. And I read through this book. It's called The Novels of Dashiell Hammett, that features the five main novels that he wrote, the only five novels that he wrote. Red Harvest and Dane Curse also feature the main protagonist as the nameless Continental Op detective. And The Maltese Falcon, of course, features Sam Spade and Ned Beaumont in The Glass Key and Nick Charles in The Thin Man. So the main stories that I want to focus on is some of the early writings of Dashiell Hammett, and also some of his contributions, his work with Alex Raymond in with the Secret Agent X9 comic strip, adventure strip, that was started publication back in 1934. And Hammett, a little bit about Hammett. Hammett was born in St. Mary's County, Maryland, back in 1894. He had to start work very early in his life. He was the second of three children, and he really had to start working because of his father, who was an alcoholic, who really didn't look after his family. So he had to work basically to help his family. His father didn't hold a job because of his drinking, didn't hold a job very long, and he had to work to support that family. Still, in his 20s, he managed to find a job working for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. It was the longest job he ever held. And then when World War I started, he served in the war, eventually becoming a sergeant. And it was during that time that he developed a lifelong illness called tuberculosis. He eventually returned from the war, and as he was recovering from his tuberculosis, he met his first wife, and he married her. His wife was a nurse, and he had, I think, he had two daughters with his wife, and but eventually he had to leave, and I believe he was still working for Pinkerton off and on. And he eventually had to leave his wife because of his tuberculosis. They had to move to a warmer climate. After the war, he was encouraged to write. Even when he worked as a detective, his boss told him that he should write, that he seemed to have a talent of putting words together. After publishing witty short quips in various publications, like the Smart Set, he learned about pulp magazines and became one of the mainstay writers in a detective and mystery pulp publication called Black Mask. Writers like Carol John Daly, Earl Stanley Gardner, and Raymond Chandler, especially Carol John Daly, had already been writing for that pulp magazine, Black Mask, with his Race Williams detective. In these pages, he created a nameless detective who became known as the Continental Op. And the Continental Op is featured in these two stories, Red Harvest and The Dane Curse. And he's also featured, of course, in this book that I already showed, The Big Knockover. And I can flip through the right to the first. This is the introduction by Lillian Hellman, and she's the one who really put this book together. I consider this a more definitive edition because of anybody that was part of Hammett's life. Hellman, who stayed his friend for 30 years and was basically had him live in her house for the last years of his life. She would be the one who would, quote unquote, know him best. But even then, she would deny that, quote unquote, she never really knew Hammett. Anyway, so these are the Continental Op stories that I have here in this edition. So there's the Gutting of Galfigno, the Fly Paper, the Scorched Face, the King Business, the Gatewood Caper, Dead Yellow Women, Corkscrew, Tulip, which is like an autobiographical account of basically an interaction between this guy Tulip and this first person who's called Pop. And it really sounds like it's an autobiographical, like it sounds like it's Hammett. But anyway, it was unfinished and remained unpublished for the longest time. Big Knockover and $106,000 Blood Money are two Continental Op stories that go together, actually. This is the first part, this is the second part. And Blood Money, or $106,000 Blood Money, was eventually published by Dell in the famous Dell Matback series. And this is the Blood Money. This is Dell number 53. And there's the Matback. There's Newhall. And I don't want to spoil the story for you, but she is one of the main antagonists, kind of a mystery antagonist in The Big Knockover, and one of the main antagonists in this novel. Anyway, that's Newhall, the Newhall house. And it's basically the entire story is here, and it's here it's published as a novel, but in here it's really reads like a short, it's a quick read actually. Anyway, so that's one edition of Blood Money. And here's the Dell book 486, and this is a different cover. And it's also a mapback with a says violence in San Francisco, murder and $1 million bank holdup and a bloody double cross. So yeah, this is the entire, I think this is the entire story, starting with Big Knockover. I think it is, but I'm not sure. Anyway, this is the edition to read because it has Hellman's careful edits. It's flawless in terms of its, from my reading of it from cover to cover, it's flawless in terms of the text. There's no, as far as I could remember, no mistakes, both in grammar and in spelling. So that's that. That's Blood Money. And I also want to show the, here's another, this is an anthology Dell Mapback of Continental Op stories. This is Nightmare Town. This is Dell number 379. And what stories do we have here? So you have Nightmare Town, The Scorched Face, and Corkscrew and Albert Pastor at Home. All right, so that's more Continental Op stories. And then we have the novel, the Hammett Homicides. This is Dell number 223. And what stories do we have here? This one is unique because it features others. So there's the house on Turk Street, in Turk Street, The Girl with the Silver Eyes, Night Shots, Main Death, which are Continental Op stories. And then you have a Chief of Police Anderson story, Two Sharp Knives, and a Guy Tharp story called Ruffian's Wife. And there you go. So that's Hammett Homicides. And there's a map of San Francisco. All right, this one I didn't read. The only ones I did read are, as I said, this one and the novels. And I also want to show The Secret Agent X9. And this is definitely Hammett. As I was researching about Hammett, I had read, this has an introduction by William F. Nolan, and I had read Nolan's biography of Dashiell Hammett called Hammett, A Life at the Edge. This has the editing of Tony Sparafucci, and it features I would consider the definitive Hammett X9. It gives you, and according to the research by Nolan, Dashiell Hammett actually wrote the dialogue for the first story. You could flip it to the first story, and you have You're the Top. So that's the first series of strips. And then it's the Mystery of the Silent Guns and the Martin Case. Those were all written dialogue, according to what I read in Nolan's stuff, by Dashiell Hammett. So it includes research by Bill Blackbeard, and it also features as an appendix, the Leslie Charteris story, The Fixer, which is a drastic departure from anything Hammett himself would write. This features all of the tropes that you find in Continental Op stories, including the femme fatale, the mystery behind the persona of the character. You never know who X9 really is. You only get hints about who he really is. Similarly with the Continental Op main character, you don't know who he is. You only get hints. He remains nameless throughout the event. That's part of what makes a good mystery. I also want to show the other versions of the novels. We'll go back here to the novels. And we have the first novel. This is Red Harvest. And this starts out in when the Continental Op is called to investigate a series of crimes in a place called Personville, which the townspeople call Poisonville. And he gets called to this by this magazine, and then he ends up, the person who calls him to do the investigation ends up dead, and so he ends up doing an investigation of the death. And it's basically a series, and it's told is if you read the novel, especially here in this edition, when you read the novel, you realize that it was serialized in 4 parts. Similarly, with the Dane Curse, you realize that it was serialized in 4 parts because each part has a kind of denouement ending or a climactic kind of solution, but with an edge of continuity, obviously, because it is a novel in serial form. So that's Red Harvest. So this is the pocketbook edition, pocketbook number 241. I believe this is the first pocketbook edition. You can look through that. There's the spine, 241. And it gives, thing about pocketbook is it gives you all of the publication time. So copyright is 1927, 29. First printing is Knopf. And this is the first pocketbook from 1943. So that's Red Harvest. And then there's the Dane Curse pocketbook. This is pocketbook number 295. And I believe also this is the first. All right. And then pocketbooks also did The Thin Man. The Nick Charles Thin Man. And that's this one. This is pocketbook number 196. And that's a nice paperback. All right, so that's that one. And I also want to show something unique. And I might have to pan out for this. This is the Star Weekly serialized version of The Siamese Cat. This is by Dashiell Hammett, and this is a Continental Op story. It starts off. Let me just check here for a sec. Yeah, no, this is the complete. This one is complete. So this is a Continental Op story. And it starts off, standing beside the cashier's desk in the front office of the Continental Detective Agency San Francisco branch. I was watching Porter check up my expense account when the man came in. He was a tall man, raw-boned, hard-faced, gray clothes bagged loosely from his wide shoulders. In the late afternoon sunlight, his skin showed the color of new tan shoes. The cover artist is a pulp cover artist named Emmett Watson. So there you go. So that's that one. And I'll show you a version of one of their serialized stories in the Toronto Star Weekly. And this is The Farewell Murder, also a Continental Op story by Dashiell Hammett. Again, told all the stories that he wrote were told in the first person. All the op stories. Starts off, I was the only one who left the train at Farewell. A man came through the rain from the passenger shed. He was a small man. His face was dark and flat. He wore a gray waterproof cap and a gray coat cut in military style. So Hammett, basically, as many have said in previous YouTube outlets, have said Hammett created the hard-boiled detective. He created the idea of the realism and the terse style of detective fiction, which was a departure from that kind of intellectualized style of fiction that you see in writings of, say, Niall Marsh, Agatha Christie, and Josephine Tay. Hammett opted for a kind of realistic style that became known as hard-boiled detective fiction. He and the Black Mask school of mystery stories created the genre. But people say Carol John Daly, people say Raymond Chandler, but I think most people who know literary fiction would agree that it was likely Dashiell Hammett. So Hammett did the Red Harvest, and he did the Dane Curse, the Maltese Falcon, the Glass Key, the Thin Man. And by doing it, he created a genre of fiction that became widely popularized by writers like Ross MacDonald and John D. MacDonald, Donald Hamilton, Raymond Chandler, and so on. So this is my presentation on Dashiell Hammett, and I hope you enjoyed it, and especially showing these rare paperbacks, these rare publications of his material. This one was published in October 14th, 1944, The Farewell Murder. This is the first part, obviously, and this is a standalone. This was from Toronto Star Weekly, Saturday, October 7th, 1944. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this look at the writings of Dashiell Hammett, and featuring one of the greats of detective fiction. His fiction is unabashedly realist. He doesn't pull punches. He describes what he sees. He, in a sense, the character has an existential flavor in that he doesn't compromise on his own, never compromises on his personal integrity. You see the characterizations that he developed, especially in the Sam Spade character in the Maltese Falcon, in his confrontation with the femme fatale Bridget O'Shaughnessy. The characters the femme fatales he developed in the earlier novels, like Dead Yellow Women. I think her name was Lillian Shan. He later, and the same kind of femme fatale in Secret Agent X9. He later really developed that kind of character in the Maltese Falcon, in the persona of Bridget O'Shaughnessy. Anyway, he was a master of dialogue. He eventually rewrote, according to an editorial I read from PBS TV, he rewrote many movie scripts. He also wrote dialogue for radio shows. And you can see that kind of dialogue, what I think is that kind of dialogue, in Secret Agent X9. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this little presentation on Dashiell Hammett. I enjoyed reading this book, and I enjoyed reading The Big Knockover with the Continental Op stories. And I enjoyed doing the presentation of these old vintage paperbacks. And remember, feel free to comment. And if you enjoyed the presentation, like I said, comment. It really helps the channel. Thanks everyone for your subscriptions. And bye.